Hi, everyone. So I'm coming to you from a casual work day at home. Um, Super privileged to be able to do that every now and then. But I wanted to just offer some thoughts, some questions, some response to the discussion question number 4 that you. So you guys were asked to sort of give an explanation or make some conjecture about why the populations and groups listed often report higher levels of depression than other groups. And as I was reading all of your posts, I was struck with how similarly you all were thinking about some of these things in ways that I have thought about these things before as well. Um, some of the ideas that came up that seemed really consistent through everyone's posts and maybe came up in unique and different ways from each of you and how you're thinking about it. But at the heart of many of what you were saying were that likely there is higher levels of depression reported among these groups because of things like oppression or discrimination, even oppression that may be related to expectations that we have of certain groups of people, of certain stages that we arrive at in life, how we're supposed to be measuring up, how our lives are supposed to look, what we're supposed to achieve. That each one of these groups sort of has a specific and particular way that in our society they may be disadvantaged, oppressed, discriminated against, and that is likely one of the most significant contributors to their reporting of depression. Some of you even sort of offered a perspective that maybe there's a factor at play in how people are making meaning of their situation as well. Um, and again, I as I was reading all this, I'm just sort of thinking. A lot of the ideas that are coming to my mind are totally exactly from a narrative sort of worldview and context in viewing how people engage with their social world, and the constructs that we create as a society that act as basically measures of success, measures of worthiness, measures of belonging, excuse me. Um, and oftentimes when we set these ideals, a lot of you talked about not obtaining the ideals that we as a society set forth for everyone, without really taking into consideration that people are coming from unique context when trying to achieve those ideals, and that some of us have barriers in place that make it more challenging or difficult to achieve those barriers than others. And hopefully, as you guys have learned in the classes you've taken previously, oftentimes that those ideals are structured around and created by white, upper class, cisgendered, heterosexual males. And there's a way that there is participation in that from lots of people, but the power dynamics in that I think are so crucial to understand. And so when we look at all these groups, even when I think about middle-aged people, that was the group I was most curious and interested in to see how you guys responded to that. But oftentimes we as a society sort of have this idea that people might go through a midlife crisis at that point. And as I was thinking about that, I was intrigued by kind of you all sort of coalescing, like, what does that really mean? And I think at that point in life is where people begin to think about meaning and purpose in maybe new and different ways than they have before. And they're starting to realize that they're now kind of getting on the other side of an age that is most valued or privileged in our society, around all different intersections, around beauty, around intellect, all these different various pieces. But that in some way, each group, there's this self-blame that can happen when there isn't this achieving or measuring up to what has been set before us as the ideal, the goal, who we're supposed to be, how we're supposed to be, what we're supposed to achieve, and by when. And it got me, and no one directly addressed this in their posts. So as I'm thinking about this, I'm resonating with all of the explanations for why there might be a possibility for each of these various groups to report higher levels of depression. And one of the things that really stood out to me and kind of brought questions to me, that I want to pose for you to think about is if depression levels are higher, or reported more often, or even maybe the symptoms of what we typically associate with someone as experiencing depression, even if those are legitimate experiences for people, if the context is producing that, then my question sort of is, then what is depression? Is depression something that really is biological? Now, I don't want to position this as like an either or thing, but I think as a society, we oftentimes respond to depression as a purely neurological, biochemical imbalance in the brain, or in the way that the body is producing hormones, or particular chemicals that are responsible for different sorts of feelings. And that is such an internalized discourse around what even depression is. But if depression is really not originating within the individual and is originating from social context, social constructs, social ideas, social oppression and systematic discrimination, if that is sort of where depression is growing from, I often wonder, why are we treating it as though it's a biological illness or disease? Why is our first inclination to medicate someone who's experiencing what we might term or label depressive symptoms? And this isn't a rhetorical question, and I have my thoughts and ideas about it, and maybe I'll do a follow-up video. But what keeps us as a society from addressing the social context, addressing maybe structural barriers or inequities that really are potentially what are the cause of producing depression in people's lives? What do you think keeps us from addressing that and so much more easily going towards looking at depression as not originating from social context or structural inequality, and to approach depression as a purely biological, neurological, biochemical disease that needs to be treated with medication? Because if we lived in a society where there were not structural inequities, would depression even exist? I think you might all say, well, no. But if we can clearly make a link between depression and social context, why is the social context not what's targeted as a point of intervention? Why do you think we as a society so easily allow ourselves to just medicate and prescribe? So that's one of the thoughts I was having as I was reading. So if you want to email me back, if you want to post some thoughts you have about that, feel free to do so. But again, I thoroughly enjoy just reading your perspectives and your thoughts and ideas about these things. And I'm also noticing too that this class has like a very scientific name, psychopharmacology. And we often don't think of a psychopharmacology class as being emotionally burdensome. Oftentimes we'll think of crisis and trauma or family violence, those as being particularly heavy classes in terms of emotion. But I think this class also, what I'm noticing as we're going through and making our way through the material, is that this is a class that it's a little bit sobering, and it's a little bit difficult to engage with some of the content on an emotional level because it's heavy stuff. At least it is for me. Because I think it highlights and really makes it glaringly clear the power at play when it comes to psychopharmaceuticals, diagnosing, prescribing. And it sort of is, while again, maybe we can embrace some of these practices as being beneficial for some in some cases, it sort of exposes this dark underbelly of a system that really is like further embedding difficult experience in people's lives. So on that note, just know that I'm here with you all as we make our way through some of this tough content. I don't know another word to call it at the moment. And although it's challenging and difficult, I also still want to sort of create a context where hope isn't diminished and where hope can grow. Because I really believe that the more of us that become aware and more keenly aware. I think maybe probably a lot of you came to this class already having some awareness about big pharma and power and all of how that might intersect and relate. But I really think that as more counselors and clinicians are really educated about this process, and definitely not to say that using medications in certain scenarios is bad. I think that there is a huge benefit to us having an awareness about this, as heavy and burdensome as that can be at times, because these aren't necessarily perspectives that a lot of people working in this particular area or field may hold. So I think we can make a huge difference and also bring a lot of hope and potentially bring a lot of healing to clients that we work with, because we are engaging in some of these ways of thinking about psychopharmaceuticals and power and people's lives in ways that sort of are trying to be accountable for some of those structural inequities that take place. So we're in this together. Keep on keeping on. I know that next week's discussion about foster kids is not any easier, but I look forward to having some conversation with you about that as well. So great work, and I'll be in touch.